Hi, I'm Nivid, and this is my microblog project. So we can start off. I have a little bit of data on here. It's almost completely empty, but these are two posts from some other user. We can start out by signing up, and if we sign up, we can simply give a username. I can say something like Nivid, a password 1234, maybe to keep it simple. A header, we can say adventure person. And then in the about me section, we can say like, I like swimming and biking. Now we can very easily sign up. I'm not going to say the password. And now we're in. Now, as we see, there's not really much here because, well, I don't have any posts yet. So I can start and make a really first post. We can say Nivid's first post. You can say something like, this is a very informative post. Now we can post this. Oops, where's my mouse? And there's that. Now we can maybe make a second post. Nivid second post. This is a less informative post. There's our second post. Now the next part of this project is an about me section where we have a header and a bio. So right now it's very simple. My name is Adventure Person and I like swimming and biking. But I can edit this and I can say, well, maybe I'm an adventure boy. And then we can say the new about me. Maybe I really like biking, swimming, and rock climbing. So we've added rock climbing. Oh, well, actually, I like running too. So maybe what we can do is say, oops. I like running, biking, and swimming, and the new header can be very, very adventurous person. So now we added the bio, and this is our new bio. But now all of a sudden I got lazy and I don't like running anymore. Well, I could change it to edit again, or I could just go to see history. And here we have all the history of each kind of version we had. And if I just want to go back before I liked running, well, I can revert to version number 2. Now, a few other kind of key things or interesting things is if we go to blog, these are our posts. But if we log out, we can see everybody's posts, ours and also the other person's. Now if I want to try to log in, if I'm logging in, I can log in very easily. However, if I log out again and I try to log in and let's say I'm a malicious person and I'm not actually Niven, I'm trying to log in. Well, it says encrypt username or password. And let's say this malicious person tries to maybe change the about me history or the about me section. Well, it'll give a clean error message saying you need to log in to have access to this page. The same goes for almost all the pages where this might be. If I want to create a blog, well, I need access to this. One last short thing, we go to sign up and I try to take Nivid's name again and put some other password. Well, username taken. All right, so that's kind of the majority of the app. Next, we're going to be moving on to the code. All right, so this is our code. In the backend, we use Postgres SQL, and then we use Express to kind of connect that to the front end. Another thing to note is that we use EJS as a template engine, which we'll get into a little bit later. And this project also used Bootstrap. Kind of a lot of things that we used for formatting were through Bootstrap. So for example, the text boxes, a lot of the buttons, part of the nav bar, and some of the cards. So the first file that's important is index.js. This is kind of where the app is, where all the routing happens. So here we, any kind of request comes through here, any get or post request, and all this does is route it through another function. So sometimes it'll just send it back automatically. So for example, if you ask for the sign up page, it'll first give you a status of okay, and then it'll clear the cookies, which is kind of like signing out anybody who's already signed in, and then it will render the sign up page with no error message. And if, for example, you click submit on the sign up page, then it will call this function from the other file, which we'll get to. And this kind of goes for all of them. And then this down here, just saying that we're always listening in this port number, and that's good. The next file, the more important file, is the queries.js, and this is where everything happens. This is the file where we actually access the database, and this is kind of where all the helper functions are too. So first function is very simple, check logged in, checks if we're logged in. The second function, this is here to kind of avoid repetition and kind of have a preliminary function to authenticate the user. We can make this more complicated later, same thing with check logged in, but right now it's very simple. It just checks if there's a cookie with the username. Now with the check access function, this for all of these functions, for all these pages here, you need to be logged in to access them. So instead of in every function kind of checking there, we just check one main thing, one main broad area here. And then if the person has access up here, then we'll just send them to the actual function. If they don't have access, then we send them to the login page with the error message. You need to log in to have access to this page. Now, the next thing is we insert into transactions. This is to avoid repetition, making like a two line part kind of like down here instead of a 4 or 5 line part. And what this does is every time we access the data or change the data, it's logged in transactions, which is a table in our database. And this kind of just helps us kind of keep track of what's happening. And that's what that insert into transactions function is. So real quick, we'll take a break. This is pgadmin, and pgadmin just has a very easy way to look at the database. So select from transactions, we're just looking at everything in this table. And as you can see, this is everything we did earlier today. So this here is kind of just all the functions. We started off with inserting a users, and then inserting into user history. And then we made a blog post, and then we made another blog post. And then we can go down here a little bit, update here. Well, this is when we update our kind of bio and do that there. All right. So that's kind of our database, and that's our transactions function. Now let's move this out of here. So then the rest of queries, oops, is just a bunch of functions. A lot of them are very short. They're all active in the database. But if you want to look at an interesting one, we can look at create user here. Create user, the first thing it does is it gets the username, password, head, and about me from the request. And it has a query for this, and it puts this query into transactions first of all. And if the length is greater than 0, we get an error message saying username is taken, because that means that there's already a row with this username in our table. If that's not true, then we'll insert this into users and insert that kind of function into transactions, and then we'll insert this into user history. And then we'll insert that into transactions too. If everything works, then we'll send a 201, which means we added something new, status code, and then we'll add a cookie for username, which is kind of how we keep track that we're logged in. And then, oops, status is twice, that shouldn't be there. But then we'll redirect them to the home page. So that's that. The next thing is kind of the EJS template files. So for example, if we look at login, this here is just getting in the bootstrap, this CSS line. But one thing we have here is we include header. So you'll notice on all the pages, header was very consistent, and that's because there's actually a separate file for the header. And this is actually broken down into 2 parts. One is if we're logged in, then the header shows things like about me, blog, log out. But if we're not logged in, then we have the options to log in or sign up. Login also has some if commands. So if there's an error message, then we'll show the error message. If there's no error message, then nothing will happen. Another reason we're using EJS is because it allows us to do a lot more complicated things, so to say. Like we have a for loop here that goes through each of our posts, and this makes it very easy without having to repeat code, so everything is nice and neat. I think that about covers our code. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our unit test cases. All right, so these are our unit test cases, and they're running right now, right there. 19 passed. Well, we'll actually get to this a little bit later, I guess. So this is made using Jest, which is a framework for unit test cases. And we use a library called Supertest because Supertest allows us to kind of just send direct GET requests and post requests without needing to necessarily test individual functions. So how this kind of works is each describe thing doesn't really matter, it's just there for our formatting sake. We have a big describe block on the outside for testing the application, and after each test we log out of the application. This way it clears the cookies and gives us a fresh start. So all of these are test cases. We test kind of the sign up, login, sign up, login, log out. We test the about pages, the about me page. Then we test the change about me page and the about me history page, and so on. Now, each of these test cases, if we can look at a random one, we can look at something like the about me page. So we have the about me page, and then within this or pages plural, and then within this we have the first about me page. And what we first do is we just check if we're logged in. So the first test case is if we're logged in. So if we're logged in, and then we send the GET request with the cookie with our username, and then we send that. And then these are kind of just things we expect from the response. So we expect the 200, we expect that everything is okay, and then we expect that the response contains these things. Now, this isn't always the case. For example, when we log out up here, we want to check that the cookies does not contain a username anymore because we logged out. If we scroll further up, when we log in with the incorrect username or password, we want to check that there's an incorrect username or password. Another thing, if we're logging in with an incorrect username or password, well, we want to check that the response is a 401 or that it's bad credentials rather than a 200 response, which is okay. And then some other things we check up here when we log in with the correct password, we want to see that it redirects us to kind of this default directory, which is where all the blogs are. So now, kind of that's just raw code, but when we run it down here, well, actually, if we look here at just config, there's a few things that are kind of important, but one thing is just that we're running it, so there's a lot of time for each test case, which we don't really need. But actually, not there. But if we look at package.json, sorry, here we run jest with coverage, which just means that we got a lot of additional information, which is why it might be cluttered in the terminal a little bit. So if you open up the terminal with all our unit test cases, these right here are all the unit test cases that are implemented. And this kind of just has the framework. So this just means that everything worked properly. It has all the GET requests, post requests. It checks access to different things and so on. So this is working pretty good, which means our program is pretty good. And that concludes our summary of the program.